Good evening, folks. My name is Elmarie Swanepoel. Thank you so much for the very kind invitation for myself and a member of my team and one of our project partners to come and talk to you this evening. As Anne introduced us, so I'm from the Loch Landscape Partnership. We are a large landscape partnership scheme focused really on working with the communities around Upper and Lower Loch in County Fermanagh. Now, Loch, for those of you who don't know, very large freshwater lake system, and it's about 500 square kilometres in size. So we are a very rural community, and people are really scattered all around the various areas of the Loch. As Anne also said, you know, we are a national lottery heritage funded programme. The value of the programme is around £3.4 million, and the lead partner is the RSPB Northern Ireland. Now, the other partners involved in the scheme, because this is a really large scheme, so we have 7 formal partners, and they are obviously the RSPB and I as lead partner. We also work closely with Waterways Ireland, the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, the National Trust, the Fermanagh Rural Community Network, a charity called Loch Heritage, as well as a small charity called Upper Loch Region. So these folks are our formal partners that help guide us through the delivery of this program. We also work very widely with some other more advisory partners to the board, and they are the likes of Tourism Northern Ireland, the Department of Agriculture, Rural Affairs, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, and very many others, and for example also the Department of Communities, the Historic Environment Division. So it's a really wide-ranging programme with a really large governance structure in place. Now, we started work way back in 2015 when there was already several successful landscape partnerships being delivered in England, Wales and Scotland, and also in Northern Ireland. And at that stage, the National Lottery Fund at that stage asked the RSPB and I and some other organisations in the area to pull together a body of work to see what the needs are in terms of heritage within Fermanagh and the surrounding areas. So between 2015 and 2017, there was a really large body of consultation work done, looking at the built heritage needs, cultural heritage needs, as well as natural heritage needs. Out of that work then came a business plan that was submitted to the Lottery Fund. And in 2018, the funding was agreed and the scheme then was kind of erected. At that stage, there was 23 commissioned programs, individual projects as such, all of, different values. And we then started delivery in about December 2018. Delivery continued up to the outbreak of COVID, at which point the partnership decided that because we are such a people-focused partnership, that we wanted to not do anything in half measures. So we decided to completely pause the project during COVID. And we then so we paused the program in about March 2020, and we restarted the program about January 2021. So we took a wee bit of a pause in between, just so that we could keep staff, volunteers, and our community partners safe. So since we've started back again, we've completed a midterm review. So just to look, how far we have come before COVID and what is left for us to do. And recently, the National Lottery Heritage Fund has agreed to extend our scheme up to December 2024 to give us an opportunity to kind of catch up for that time lost during COVID but to also really focus on work with our community partners here to think about what is the legacy going to be of this program of work in this area. So all the work that we do in this program focuses on 7 very distinct themes. Now, I will talk you through each of these, and I'll give you just a very quick introduction to some of the projects that we do. But since we started in 2018, we started off with 23 projects initially, and we are now currently delivering 43 programs. So, you know, it is a successful scheme in this area. We have very high levels of community engagement, and there is a lot for us to do, will I say. So let me talk to you about some of the exciting work and some of the projects that we do. So the first theme that we work under is called improving access. So one of our objectives is to make sure that we are increasing public access to the heritage assets in this area. So we do everything from infrastructure projects, you know, to build paths, trails, updating jetties to the Loch, etc. And some of the projects that we have delivered to date and that we're in the process of delivering is, so we've built a nature trail in Smith Strand, which is an area adjacent to the Loch. We have built a community path in Lisnarrick that connects the village of Lisnarrick to Loch Erne. So it gives people the opportunity to actually walk directly to the Loch. We're also working with the National Trust in Fermanagh, and there is a big 2,000-acre estate here called Crom Estate. And on that estate, we're working with the National Trust to open up access to about 10.5 kilometers of walking trails, as well as to build some natural play areas for people to go and explore the estate. One of the really big projects, which is only now starting to kind of take shape and where you will see some of the more public outputs this year, is we're working with the local council and with Waterways Ireland and the Heritage Environment Division to develop a pilgrim trail. So it's not going to be a physical trail, you know, leading people on a specific journey, but we've recognized that along the Erne system, there is several sites of real monastic and ecclesiastical significance. Some, you know, which is really, really special. And for example, we have a complete round tower on Devonish Island, one of only 2 remaining in the island of Ireland. So the pilgrimage trail this year then, so we've picked 14 sites along the Erne system. Some is land-based, some is water-based. And over this year, we are doing some infrastructure works to those sites to kind of open access to them. And we will be working with some local tourism providers to provide access routes and experiences so that people can actually journey along that path, but in, you know, various different sections at a time. So the other project that we're working with is with a local canoeing club called the Erne Paddlers. And in the last 4 years, they have given access to the likes of over, I think, 1,000 young children, to give them access to go canoeing for the first time on Loch Erne. A hugely successful project. And what we've learned from that is that even though people live right next to the Loch, and most of them look out over the Loch for most part of their years, many people have not been on the water, you know, and wouldn't advise their children to do so. And as such, we work with the Erne Paddlers, but also with some other paddling groups to give children the opportunity to actually go out on the water and experience everything from paddle boarding to kayaking, canoeing, etc. So that is the theme around improving access. The next body of work that we focus very much on, and I know that this is probably quite close to many of your hearts, is around biodiversity and landscape. This is a truly special area of real natural heritage significance, and as such, you will see a lot of the projects reflect some of the body of work that needs to be done, not just now, but in the future after the work of the Landscape Partnership finishes. So as an example, we do a lot of projects planting trees in different areas for different communities, you know, right tree in the right place for the right community. We have a really exciting project that's called Amazing Pollinators, and that is about working with youngsters again, trying to get them to understand the importance of pollinators in the landscape. And one of the outputs is that we're looking at where there might be hunger zones for pollinators, and to see whether we can do things like creating wildflower meadows, planting trees along those hunger zones, etc. And then there's a really exciting wild bee project in this area as well, that is focusing on research around the resistance to the varroa mite in native wild bees in this area. So a really, really exciting project there. We also work on invasive species. There's a large project there working with the local council on that. And then the bug life project, the jewel of the Erne, that focuses on a very specific reed beetle, which is only found in this part, in a few parts of Loch. And then we have a large project with the RSPB in the west area here, and they are doing a lot of work on the islands on Lower Loch, and their work focuses on the protection of the protection and conservation of breeding wader species. Now, that project, I suppose, is really successful. It's been going for many years, and I suppose it will be really good for you to invite them at some stage for that team to come and talk to you specifically just about the outputs of that project, because the work that they've done to date is really unique. And then tonight I have invited Michael Stinson from the Loch Wildflowers Council, and they have a community farmer-driven conservation project around breeding waders as well. So Michael will tell you all about that after the break. So a lot of the work that we do, as I said, it focuses on people. We recognize and we know that people is the key to making conservation a success, to getting people to love where they live and to care about where they live and to care about it for generations to come. So a lot of the work that we do is trying to get people to volunteer, and we want to try and get people to participate in the various projects that we do. So as an example, we do a lot of litter picks, and we just today spoke about the big litter pick, which is going to come up in April, where we will try and galvanize communities all around the Loch to do a litter pick in the spring. Like I said before, tree planting, wildflower meadow creation. We've delivered 2 very successful archaeology digs where we got school children involved and local volunteers involved. We do a lot of biodiversity and citizen science activities as well. Thinking about people doing event volunteering and lots of volunteer training as well. So just to give you a bit of an example of the scale of work that we do, between June last year and December last year, we hosted nearly 50 events, and we had over, I think, 4,500 people participate within that 6-month period. So a really active, really open community engagement program. So like I said, everything we do is around just engaging people, different ages, different groups of people, recognizing that there are people that have very different interests, and there are people that care on very different levels, and we try to offer some level of engagement and participation for people along that journey. So lots of the work we do also focuses around training and skills, and this is about trying to give community groups and individuals enhanced capacity, enhanced skills, with the idea that if we can get people trained up, get them engaged, then they will be the ones who will keep the heritage in this area alive. So examples of things that we've done. Recently, last year, October, we've done vernacular building surveys. So we took out some volunteers to some of the building ruins on Lustimur Island, for example, which is one of the RSPB islands. And the volunteers then go and survey some of these buildings and some of the vernacular history. That is then recorded to make sure that in the past there is a really good record of what would have been. Then we also work with people to capture the memories, from local people who would have lived in those places, just so that there is, again, a bit of a record, but also to just keep that heritage alive. Again, so community archaeology. We also do courses and things like landscape reading. We've worked with community groups to build traditional boats. So in this part of the world, in the past, people would have traveled via the Loch, which is a flat bottomed boat, and they would have in the past used those boats for anything from transporting livestock to materials to for building projects, but also just to ferry people between the islands that is on the Loch and the mainland. We also do courses in strawcraft, rushcraft. We're recently now finishing up a willow weaving course, which is an advanced course where we are now training people to become trainers in willow weaving, because we found that actually there's such a huge interest in the art of willow weaving. So we started off with some introductory courses, and we've now got an advanced course where we've trained 6 people who can now become trainers themselves. We also done courses in tour guiding. So we've trained about 20 tour guides, and we've also trained people in formal storytelling skills, because, in this area, fables and stories and history is so important. And we're really trying to engage with people to find engaging ways to kind of share that heritage with others. So in terms of education, we have a really, really big education program. So we have a natural heritage education program, and Tony is here tonight to talk to you a little bit about that. But we also have a built heritage education program and a cultural heritage education programs as well. But in terms of the natural heritage education, Tony will talk to you a little bit about the schools convention that we do, the Young Amateur Naturalist Project, etc. So I won't take anything away from what Tony will tell you. And you'll see at the bottom there, the Mummers Project. So I don't know whether any of you know about Mummers. You might have heard about Straw Boys, Wren Boys, for example. So in the past, the Mummers in Fermanagh would have been very active. So we are working with the Mummers Foundation to do some training to schools and to try and reinvigorate some of the mumming traditions in this area. Then just to give you a bit of a quick flavor. So like I said, we started off with 23 projects and we've now ended up with 43. So we have engaged with 20 specific groups around the area, and we're doing these sort of smaller scale community projects with them. And what is great about this fund is that we can almost give the communities, what they are interested in, and we can help them to kind of realize some of their local ambitions. So through this fund, we have done everything from, building paths, opening areas of woodland. We've held 3 regattas now, using the traditional boats. We've done old-time markets with some of the school children. We have, upgraded graveyards. We have upgraded church windows, stained glass windows, for example. And the Fermanagh Genealogy Group, they've published a memory map of fallen soldiers during World War II, a specific group of soldiers that lived in Enniskillen. Again, a really fantastic project there, really capturing the imagination and some of the really incredible stories from this part of the world. And then through the In-Water Taxis project, we have funded the first all-electric boat on Loch Erne as well. So you can see, those 20 projects, it is anything and everything. And it gives us the opportunity, again, to be flexible and to work with the community to help people to engage in their heritage, in various different ways. So all in all, like I said, we work really hard to not just engage with people, but to also try and understand how people engage differently, in heritage. And we have set up quite a few networks now, thinking of having smaller discussion groups about very specific subjects. And our overall sort of network of organizations and groups that we work with. So we work with about 73 different organizations and different groups in this area. And we have about 190 people that is kind of formally signed up, to our newsletters, etc. And then on our social media platforms, I think that we have around 2,000 people now that engage with our work. So we feel that over a short period of time, that is quite a successful number. So we do everything from online seminars like you're doing this evening. We do lots of public events. We do training courses. We do, anything and everything really that help people to engage in their heritage. And then as part of our midterm review there in 2020, we sort of published this map, and we're just in the process now of updating this. And this just kind of brings together, all of these things that we've done.
Can we see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you all very much for the opportunity to talk to you tonight about our project as part of the Loch Erne Landscape Partnership projects that Anne-Marie has outlined already. I'm going to talk to you about a project that has been running for about 7 or 8 years now, in fact, a little more, 9 years now, and started out in a small way prior to the money coming from the Loch Erne Landscape Partnership. And thanks to the project, or thanks to the money from the partnership, it has expanded greatly in the last 5 years or so. So part of my job is to manage this project as well as some other things. But what I want to talk to you about is quite an innovative project, and one which has had a really good impact on a range of birds which are now in decline as breeding species right across Ireland and indeed these islands and indeed Western Europe. So these birds are that are in quite a lot of difficulty. So we have to try quite hard to help them. And this project is one effort locally to try and do that. But just to set some background context, it's an innovative project involving a range of partners, and I'll talk with the partners a little bit more further into the presentation. But the idea for this work was initially envisioned by Loch Erne Wildfowlers Council, and it's an organisation that has been in existence for more than 30 years. And on first viewing of this, you might think to yourself, well, why would these wildfowlers, and for anybody who doesn't know what wildfowlers do, they hunt ducks, and this is the organisation that's controlling the duck hunting on Upper and Lower Loch Erne. Why would they be interested in conservation of birds? And this is a really important point, that from the outset, they realised that it's really important to be carrying out their activities sustainably. It's no use shooting all the ducks one year and having nothing left in the future. And it's really important to maintain the habitat for the birds, which are their quarry species. And the main quarry species here are things like mallard and teal and quite a lot of Canada geese as well. So that's where they came from initially. And they began their work, perhaps unsurprisingly, trying to help breeding ducks, particularly mallard, and introduced the duck tunnel idea from North America to the Erne system. And this was really successful. One of the wildfowling clubs that formed part of the council won international awards for this. And the mallard use these, and it's really a good way of helping the local mallard population. But over time, they were increasingly aware that there were other birds around the loch which were in trouble. And you can imagine these guys spend a lot of time on the loch in the wintertime, but also in the summer as fishermen and other activities on the loch. Some of them work on the loch. And they were very keenly aware of the decline in breeding waders. And they decided back in 2013, 2014, they wanted to help address breeding wader issues locally. And to do this, they began to look for a site to carry out their work. And the site that jumped out, first of all, was a site called Bow Island. And you'll see it there on the map on the left of the island of Ireland. It's up in the northwest corner in County Fermanagh. And then within the northwest corner of the county, you'll find Bow Island marked on the second one. So it's a large island in the northern part of Lower Loch Erne, the largest island on Lower Loch Erne. It's a unique site in that although we call it an island, for the past almost 100 years, it hasn't been an island, strictly speaking. It has been joined to the mainland using two causeways and bridges. And because of that, it's different from some of the uninhabited islands down in the loch where breeding wader conservation takes place. This is a farmed environment. There are more than 100 people live on the island. And although agriculture there has intensified, it's not quite as much as on other parts of the county. And critically, and this is really important for our work with the project, the local farmers were aware that these birds formerly were more common on their land and had declined in recent decades. But critically, there were some still remaining as well. And as you might appreciate, it's the older farmers, those who are probably over 70 now, who remember these birds in abundance. And unfortunately, as time goes on, the number of people who will remember these birds being so common will decline. And it's really important that we act before all local memory of these species is lost. So it's very much a grassroots effort, and it comes from a collaboration between the community on the island and the Wildfowlers Council. Without labouring this too much, I'm sure many people will be aware of the factors that have led to the decline of these birds. I could talk for an hour on this topic, but thankfully for you, I won't. But just to cover it briefly, the key to the decline in birds in the breeding wader group or breeding wader suite and across Fermanagh, Ireland, and across Western Europe is really driven by changes in land use. And land use change has been rapid and really significant in our part of the world. And a lot of this is associated with the intensification of grassland management. The majority of the Fermanagh countryside is farmed, and in the last 4 or 5 decades, indeed even less in some areas, we have seen a real intensification of management, pushing farmers towards production of silage, whereby the grass is cut much more frequently and indeed much earlier than it would have been formerly. Now it's cut in late May, early June, and then repeatedly cut throughout the summer, whereas previously it would have been cut once in July or August. All the things that go around grassland management of this intensity, drainage, slurry, simplification of the grassland, sward into ryegrass monoculture away from the species rich meadows we would have had, wildflower meadows in the past, all of these things impact the ability of the birds to nest in these fields. In our uplands, we have lost a huge amount of habitat to non-native coniferous forestry, primarily Sitka spruce and lodgepole pine. Around the loch itself, on the shores of the loch, and this is particularly pertinent for our project, some farmland has been abandoned, and we have seen an encroachment of scrub, the development of woodland. Now that, for many species, is a really positive thing, but unfortunately for the breeding waders that we're interested in, the scrub is not an attractive habitat to nest in, obviously, nor indeed is it attractive to nest near it. The birds avoid it due to the risk of predation arising from the vegetation. We have an issue locally in Fermanagh and across these islands with increased predation. Simply, these birds don't fledge enough young to replace themselves. And of course, we have the ongoing spectre of climate change in the background. And this factor is something that becomes more and more apparent with every passing day. Particularly locally, we can see it in the more extreme weather events we get in the spring. Very intense showers at the wrong time can be hugely detrimental to the birds. But also, we've had droughts running, which is hard to believe in the west of Ireland. We have weeks and weeks of dry weather in the spring in recent years, and that makes it very hard for these birds to feed. Our project seeks to address both the habitat and the predation issues, make sure the land is as good as possible for them to nest and feed in, and then to make sure that the birds actually fledge enough young to replace themselves as adults, but also hopefully to increase the population size. So from the start, we engaged support, or we engaged monitoring of our sites from a local environmental consultancy. We wanted independent monitoring to show how the work has been going on. We have a main focal site and 3 additional sites. We have 4 key target species, which will be familiar to most bird watchers. The lapwing, the curlew, the redshank, and the snipe, all of which, as breeding species in Ireland, have suffered declines, anything ranging from the mid-70s in terms of percentages right up to curlew, which have declined by more than 90%. And indeed, in the south of Ireland, the most recent estimate suggested there's been a 98% decline in breeding curlew in the 26 counties of the south from the 1980s until now. So when you get into figures such as 98% decline, it gives you an idea of just the sheer scale of the loss that has been within the last 3 or 4 decades. It's been horrendous. And then we have an honorary fifth one, which I didn't really think about, is the common sandpiper, which is a migratory species that arrives on our shores in the summertime, a little bit like the swallows and all the other warblers and things that arrive in spring. And the sandpiper is quite important to our project as well. So what did we do? We took scientific advice from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. They identified habitat and being an issue, the scrub encroachment, the loss of waders, and the low productivity for the remaining pairs. And at that point, we began to work this back in 2014, 2013. And as you might expect, as a small organization, the wildfighters didn't have a huge amount of money. So we sought outside external funding sources to undertake this work. And we were lucky to receive funding initially in the initial phase from the local government agencies, the Department of Agriculture, the local Environment Agency, help from the Wildlife Habitat Conservation Trust, and then critically from Loch and the Loch and the National Lottery Heritage Fund from 2018 onwards. And we progressively improved the habitat. This is on one of the main sites, the main site. And progressively as time went on, we opened up more and more species-rich sward for these birds. You can see on the left-hand picture, a digger working on the site to clear thick rush. This is cut back in this time of year, sort of February, March, or January, February rather, so that when the birds return to the site in March, the habitat is in good condition for their arrival, and then hopefully then they will successfully breed. The habitat restoration doesn't just help the waders, it helps a lot of other things. We have a profusion of wildflowers come back onto the site, things like ragged robin and these orchids, which we now have in abundance we didn't have before. And the picture we have on the left there is obviously a snipe feeding in a mud scrape we created on the site. So that's in terms of the habitat. The other big issue relates to predation, and we really have to address this one as well. And in common with RSPB locally, we undertake control of corvids, primarily hooded crow, non-Native American mink, and fox. And all of these species, whilst they weren't the original cause of the decline, because the habitat now has been so fragmented and reduced, a very small number of nests are available. And when these are predated, the impact is greatly magnified beyond what it would ever have been prior to the loss of all this habitat. So as we restore the habitat, we will have to manage predation for the foreseeable future until we get enough habitat back so that it doesn't really become as big a factor. And to give you some idea, at the same time that our curlew population has declined by more than 90% locally, our hooded crow population has increased by almost 180% in the same time frame. So you can imagine many fewer curlew, a lot more crows. The risk is elevated there in terms of predation issues. And sometimes we get predation by other species that aren't what we would expect necessarily, but this is one from the south of a lesser black-backed gull taking a curlew egg from a nest, And to give you that there's only 105 nests estimated in the south now, you can imagine that the loss of one nest becomes significant, whereas in the past it wouldn't have been such an issue when there were thousands of birds nesting on the island of Erne in the south. So what have we achieved? So moving towards conclusion here, we have seen an increase in our snipe territories, and this is one site. We have 4 sites altogether that we work on. We only had 5 displaying birds, drumming and chipping birds back in 2014. And for the last 2 years, we have had 28 displaying birds across this site. And there are probably very few places on the island of Erne that have seen an increase like this in that time frame. Within the same time frame, snipe have been red listed in Ireland as a breeding species. So overall, they're doing very badly, but we have managed to turn it around on our sites through a lot of hard work and cooperation with the farmers. We also have had good success with our common sandpiper, increase from 2 pairs, stabilized now around 8 pairs, a 300% increase. A peak last year, a little bit of a drop this year, which is to be expected up and down, but those birds are doing really well. The challenge lies in the larger birds. Our redshank do fairly well. Our lapwing struggled to fledge enough young, and critically, our curlew are just hanging on. We have a couple of pairs of curlew used in the site for feeding. We have 1 pair this year bred on this site in particular. They managed to fledge young, which is really encouraging, but really it's part of a very small population now on Lower Loch Erne, which is probably in the region of 50 pairs. And 50 pairs now is a large percentage of the entire population of the north of Ireland, which is probably well short of 200 pairs now. So every pair counts, and hopefully going forward we'll be able to increase that number. It's very hard to get curlew to come back to sites they have deserted and start to breed again, so it's a huge challenge moving forward. We, in common with LELP overall, we engage with a range of partners and community groups and different sections of the community. These are various people we have engaged with through walks to listen to breeding snipe, drumming at night, school children, wildfowlers talking with scientists in the bottom left, and then a ministerial visit a few years ago as well. So to conclude, our project is a community partnership. There are challenges and opportunities that arise from that. There are good things that we arise from within the community. We're not seen as being outside it. And we have an understanding of the possibilities and limitations. One of the limitations is we are obviously working on private land. We don't own the land, so we need to maintain a good relationship with the landowners, and that's a critical part of our work. And we also need to ensure that going forward, the farmers actually benefit financially from the local agri-environment schemes, which isn't quite there yet in the north of Ireland, but hopefully in the coming years, we'll be able to have a much more sustainable agri-environment approach to help these birds and ensure the farmers do the right things to help them. And our project is very much a work in progress. We always have to manage the sward, the grassland, and ensure that the regrowth of scrub doesn't occur to prevent the birds nesting. We are undertaking our education work, whether that be in the form of dealing with local schools and bringing them out on site, but also trying to find out a little bit more about our birds. We hope to undertake a tracking project starting this year, looking at some of the birds that use the site and where they go when they're not on site, and move the project into new sites. And we're very lucky in the last couple of years, we've expanded into another part of Loch Erne, about 30 miles away, and they're in the initial phase of having good success on some of their sites up there. So it's very much a work in progress. So thank you all very much, and I'd be happy to take questions after Tony's talk, and hopefully that gives you an insight into what we do. Thank you.
Well, folks, just to let you know, my name is Tony Smith, and I'm the Environmental Education Officer for LELP. I only came into post in early November of last year, and one of the things that I have a real passion about is about the environment and wildlife. And I suppose maybe to start off, if I can start with a wee quote, and it's about across the world, young people are taking positive action for nature. However, there's never been a more important time to actively listen and to involve the young people, ensuring that each and every one of them feel empowered in the difference that they can make, not just to the people of this world, but to the nature of the planet. And with that, I'm going to just have a start now and go through some of the projects that I've been involved in and we're constantly running within LELP, especially around the education, and it's a natural heritage education project. So the first I'm going to cover is the Loch Schools Convention. And the Schools Convention, it provides a field-based citizen science activity focusing on outdoor recreation, as well as natural heritage workshops from partner organisations. So what have we achieved? So the first 2 years, we've able to produce this convention where we've been able to include 1,131 young people from the ages of 9 and 10 years of age, which was equivalent to 33 schools. This also included our partners, which was 8 heritage organisations from the RSPB, Fermanagh Beekeepers, Waterways Ireland, the Fermanagh Lakelands or Culca Lakelands Geopark, and many others. And as Elmarie said during her presentation, it's fantastic to see, because even though we have all these people and young people who live around Loch Erne, there's quite a few of them have never been out even on a canoe. So to be able to use some outdoor recreation and citizen science, bringing it all together and letting kids then realise we need to look at this and take care of our planet. So it has been a sort of a massive and a very worthwhile program to do. And we have another one planned for this year. So hopefully then we'll have another 600 young people involved in this year's one. So that's the Loch Erne Schools Convention. This for me is my baby, and it's the one that I really, really enjoy running and taking part in, and it's the Young Amateur Naturalist. The Young Amateur Naturalist project, it's a face-to-face as well as online education program, providing a collection of resources and training to support the curriculum-based biodiversity and environmental education of the pupils, not only in Key Stage 1, 2, but also in Key Stage 3. Just to give you the level of support and activity that we're doing, since November of last year, which is basically, you could say, less than 3 months, we've already been working with 980 young people from Key Stage 1, 2 and 3, as well as 161 adults, as in teachers and classroom assistants. And that is me going in and working with on different themes around the birds, mammals, trees and habitats of Fermanagh, while also looking at invasive species, using games and resources and providing that these young people are coming away with enough knowledge that, and the teachers, that they can then, when I leave the school after doing 6 weeks, that the teachers then can take on board and keep running the project for the young people. I suppose the other thing which we were able to do is, out of 25 schools, we were able to provide them a set of resources, and these are hands-on resources with the likes of quadrats, the likes of charts, information charts on the wildlife, on the birds, as well as mini beast holders and putters, sweep nets, a whole range of activities that and items that they can use back in their school, and just to encourage the kids to get out far more. Then we have the education forum. And I suppose the education forum is a meeting to provide critique and evaluation for the entire programme. And it is an initiative that came from the Young Amateur Naturalist, and the forum brings together a range of natural heritage providers, as well as teachers and individuals, to learn from one another, but also work together in a more collaborative manner. And that's what everything we do within LELP is. It's about making these connections so that we can bring people together, that at the end of the program in 2024, that we've made enough connections and that people are able to go on themselves and with people they've met and worked with. And that collaboration is going to be our sort of the heritage that we're going to leave behind, and which I think is going to be amazing for them. We then have forest school training. Again, this is something that I feel very passionate about. And one of the things with LELP was provide forest school training to 20 key stage 1 and 2 schools and 2 teachers from key stage 3. Now, this is run by the Northern Ireland Forest School Association, and it's a level 3 forest school training, and it's OCN Northern Ireland accredited. So all these teachers are going to end up being forest school practitioners, and in turn, what they're going to do is that each of those forest school teachers are bringing back this training to their schools, and they're incorporating it into the school curriculum. We're seeing a tremendous amount of work that's been done with outdoor learning within Fermanagh. And basically, I would say a lot of it is down to the work that LELP has done prior to me coming in, and hopefully what we can see in the future. But it's tremendous to see the young people getting out and enjoying it. And we're very proud to be involved with our partners of the Northern Ireland Forest School Association in providing that training for teachers for the outdoor learning. Our next one is our youth summer schemes and the John Moore Award. At the minute, we are currently hosting 3 5-day outdoor learning camps, and that's for 36 young people from the ages of 12 to 16, with them achieving their John Moore Award. Now, each of the days, so basically the way it's going to be done is, and the way it has been running, is that 12 kids come from different backgrounds, and which is we were very keen to do that because we such have a diverse, in a very diverse culture in Northern Ireland, and you can't be seen to be going from one side to the other. So what we have to do is we have to look at the overall picture of Northern Ireland, taking in all religions and all cultures and bringing them all together. And that's very important to what we do. With this award is we get them to a place where they're going to look and discover an area. They then have to explore it. Followed, then they must do a conservation section of it. And then finally, they share their findings. With this award, what we're also including in it is that the kids get a chance then to get extra learning. So a lot of the 2 of the camps, for instance, they're including the Leave No Trace certified courses, where the young people then at the end of it, not only will they come out with the John Moore Award, but they'll also come out with their Leave No Trace certified course, which I think is wonderful for their CVs. So that's another wee thing that we're doing, and that is the youth scheme on the John Moore Award. The next education element is, of course, our online resources. And LELP have designed and in the process of delivering the 54 curriculum-based lesson plans, and that is going to be 8 separate lesson plans for each of the key stages 1 to 3. With this included is the associated resources, as I said, which we've already given to the schools, and also the activities. At the minute, I'm going into each of the schools, as I said, and spending 6 weeks in each school, working with the different key stages and the teachers, working over the lesson plans. So by the end of the 6 weeks, at least then the teachers are going to have a good knowledge of the plans, but also have the skills and the confidence in themselves that they can go out and with the young people and their pupils and run these activities, and which is going to, in turn, it's going to create citizen science and hopefully the new young naturalists that we really want. And I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes. And the first quote is by John Lubick, and it was, "Earth, sky, woods, fields, lakes, rivers, and mountains, and the sea are excellent schoolmasters and teach us more than we can ever learn from books." And the last one is, "Teaching children about the natural world should be seen as one of the most important events in their lives." And that was by Thomas Berry. And with that, I suppose one of the young people who I have worked with over many years and has gone on to do great things, and I think probably most of you in RSPB would know him, and it's young Dara McAnulty, the young naturalist. And Dara was one of my scouts for 8 years, and who came to to Scouts, and I'm still heavily involved with Scouts. And he's seen a passion for nature and the outdoors through Scouting. And now I look on with pride at how well this young person from Fermanagh has done. And I suppose, you know, for him now to be awarded the youngest person in the New Year's honours list to be awarded the BEM, it's great pride in my heart to know this young person came through Fermanagh, came through natural heritage, through Scouting, and has went on to do great things and will do great things. And I suppose that's it. So thank you. If you have any questions, like Michael says, I'm more than willing to see can we answer them.
We've got a few questions that have come up on the chat line. I'll try and relay them and then we'll open this up for anywhere else. From Boo, the project sounds fabulous and full of optimism. How did you specifically engage teenagers? Now that was posted before Tony's most interesting talk then. Does that cover it, Boo, or do you want to say a bit more, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has anything to answer, it's just quite often very obvious at a lot of wildlife and nature things. You get lovely pictures of kids about that age, sort of 7, 8, 9. You get lovely people about our age, and it's that gap in between the teenagers and I suppose the young adults as well.
Can I maybe answer that, Anne?
Yeah.
Can I come in on that? So how we approach community engagement, I suppose it's about thinking about who we engage with, but also who we're not engaging with and why. Okay, so every time that we take on a project and we take on something that we do, we constantly think, so which groups are we working with, but also more importantly, who are we not working with? And I think that through that process, sometimes we would identify very specific age groups of people. Okay, so teenagers, everybody will tell you that teenagers are a very difficult group to engage. We certainly haven't found that so much. But we do work really hard at it. Okay, so our approach would be is that we would first of all talk to them and not tell them what we think is best for them. Okay, so I think that we don't focus on telling them to put down their iPads and, you know, get out in nature, but we actually offer opportunities that make it fun for them to, you know, go out and engage. And sometimes because they don't particularly want to do that on their own, we would do things that will involve whole families. Okay, so if you can't get one specific group, then we think about how do we engage other people around them to involve them, maybe indirectly at some times. Okay, so we would do a lot of family activity. We also do quite a bit of intergenerational work. Okay, so for example, a recent project that we're working on now with the Arts Council is that we're doing some community art workshops, and we are specifically asking the older generation to bring some of the younger generation with them to do some community art and to kind of share experiences, memories, and things like that. So, you know, intergenerational activity, I think, really works to kind of engage them outside of the peer group, but still in that family center. You know, and that is a safer space, I think, for a lot of youngsters to go. The other thing is that we would be working with quite a few already established networks. So we would go to youth clubs, you know, where they are running in the evenings. We would be working with, you know, scout groups for people, children of specific ages. And then we also work quite closely, I suppose, through the schools to see how the work that we do will link with the curriculum, you know, and how we can help them to engage children in a different way with the curriculum. So like Tony said earlier on, you know, we do a lot of things about natural heritage education, but we also actually do a lot with the schools around community work and just basically trying any and every way around, you know, A levels or whatever to engage with youngsters in that way. So I think there is no one answer. And, you know, I won't say that we're doing this the best as what anybody can, but we certainly try to involve teenagers as much as what we are trying to involve anyone else.
Thank you.
Good. We have a then question, I think, for Michael about who does the surveys for the breeding bird monitoring.
Thanks, Anne. That's a really good question, Helen. That's an important one, I think. From the outset, they were very conscious that they, as a group, didn't have the expertise potentially to survey these birds, and it was really important that there was good quality data gathered. I suppose the most basic level to identify whether what they were doing was actually having an impact or not, positive or negatively. The other thing would have been in terms of monitoring, in terms of funders, it's really important that you have robust, independent data to show what you're doing has an impact. So from the outset, as I mentioned, they engaged an organization called Erne Environmental. They're a local environmental consultancy, and they'd be run by a man called Kerry Leonard, who's a well-respected ornithologist over here, and he would have undertaken through his company a lot of breeding waiter surveys for the local environment agency around Upper and Lower Loch Erne and on our other big loch over here, Loch Ness. So he would be really familiar with the species and really familiar with the challenges the birds face. So he has been the person who's been undertaking our surveys now. This year will actually be the 10th year of it, bar the 1 year that was missed through COVID in 2020. So we're beginning now to get a really good data set going forward using his surveying year on year. So that's an excellent question.
Yeah, and I had a sort of follow up on that one about do you do any ringing of birds for monitoring?
Yeah, that's one that has been on the, if you like, it's been on the back burner for a few years. I suppose the most abundant birds we have on site, as I said, are snipe and common sandpiper. And as you can imagine with snipe, they're not that easy to do things like colour ringing on. There's been a little bit of just ordinary metal ringing done, but the difficulty with that is that's mostly done in the winter time, and we get the best part of 1 million migrant snipe arrive in Ireland in the winter time, so we're not necessarily getting our local ones. And there's been reluctance to go onto the breeding sites to dazzle these birds at night with the lamps, as you have to catch them, is the best way to catch them. So there's been a bit of reluctance. So I did allude to a little bit of the work through LELP. We hope to carry out some tracking work using satellite tracking devices, and we hope to put those specifically on snipe, because Irish breeding snipe, we don't really know where they go. It's assumed they are not particularly migratory based on a small number of ring recoveries just from metal rings, but that's really not a very big sample, so we're keen to do that. The other thing is, obviously, with things like curlew and lapwing, these birds are now so rare as breeding species. There has been reluctance amongst ringers to actually go and do this work for the risk of disturbance. We don't have very many of these birds to, if you like, if birds are disturbed off nests during the ringing process, it's a problem. But critically in the south, the last couple of years, they have carried out some satellite tracking of breeding curlew. So that has given us some insights into how the birds are interacting with the wider landscape. And a lot of that work would have actually come from some BTO work that happened in North Wales, which showed that the birds were nesting in one field, but going quite a long way away, kilometers away to feed. So there's quite a lot more movement, and the importance of a diverse landscape for curlew is really becoming more and more important as we go on with this. So definitely there are things afoot in terms of monitoring, in terms of tracking, rather than ringing particularly.
Thank you. We have a question from Diana. Lots of children living near Loch Erne have never paddled canoes on it. Do you think that people living near the loch identify with it, or are they more likely to identify with other places, for example, particular villages or towns? That's possibly a Elle-Marie one, is that?
That's very good. Thanks, Dana. That's an excellent question. So I moved over to Fermanagh in 2018 myself. So I came from England, and what I found when I came here is a very, very different culture. Okay, and this was one of the questions specifically that caught my attention. You know, why is it when there's this incredible loch on people's doorsteps, are people not on it all the time? And I suppose I have kind of learned that there is various reasons for that. Okay, One of the reasons are, up to quite recently, there was quite a lot of political unrest in the country. So I suppose people had very different objectives than, recreation in the countryside. Okay, so it wasn't really pushed, I think, as an agenda at that time. So that would be one thing. The other thing that I found is that this area is so rich in stories and fable and folklore, and there is a lot of it associated with Loch Erne. Unfortunately, Loch Erne claims quite a few lives every year, and due to that reason, I think people are just naturally quite hesitant, to kind of use it, and that's really one of the things that we are trying to kind of change, is to get people on it, make sure that they understand the hazards, and how to keep themselves safe on it. And then the other reason, I suppose, is that because of the weather, in this area, you have a very long, dark winter. And there is a saying here that for 6 months of the year, Loch Erne is in Fermanagh, and for the other 6 months of the year, Fermanagh is in Loch Erne, okay, because there's a lot of flooding happening over winter time. So it becomes quite treacherous, around various areas for people to go walking around the Loch shore, etc. So I think there is various reasons for it. But certainly what we found is that there is a great appetite for people to engage, with the water. But you're absolutely right, people here do associate and they identify very closely, not just with Fermanagh, but also being Northern Irish, being Fermanagh, the towns that they are from, where it is situated, Upper Loch, Lower Loch, etc. So yeah, very, very interesting cultural mix there. You're just on mute, Anne. You're still on mute, Anne, I think.
Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me? No.
I can hear you now, Dan. Yes.
All right, sorry, I hadn't realized I was muted. Yes, the myths and the legends suggest to me that there was at one stage a sort of feeling, an identity of people probably identified with the Loch. But from what you're saying now, it is seen in some ways much more of a threat, quite sort of treacherous. Quite something that they probably don't identify with so much. But
yeah,
it's
no,
good
absolutely.
that you get that identity in.
No, definitely. And I think up to quite recently, people had lived on the islands on the Loch, and right. People had commuted on the Loch, and they used the Loch in a very different way, many years ago than what the Loch would be used for today and promoted as today.
Yeah. Oh, well, very interesting project. Thank you.
Hey, another quick question on the graph you showed about the increase in the number of corvids, sort of paralleling the decline in waders. Was there a particular reason for the corvid increase?
That's one that causes quite a lot of debate over here. As to, it's very hard to tease out what it might be. A lot of things are suggested. The change in the farming system probably allows the birds to overwinter better. There's we have a much bigger herd of cattle nationally, if you like, now than we used to have. These animals are fed often very nutritious meal type foods during the winter time, and you will quite often get crows feeding with cattle indoors, and that probably, one, they'll survive better and their breeding success will probably be higher as a result of that. They're undoubtedly, the milder winters probably have an impact. The birds just simply don't die off as much. There will certainly be a reduction in control of the birds over time. All of these things interact to have an impact on them. And again, it is important, and I sort of said this during the presentation, there's not a direct correlation between the increase in hooded crow and the decline in curlew. It's more to illustrate that that's an extra pressure. Now the real problem is the is the land use change, and because the birds are much less common now, there's a smaller number of nests, so the impact on one nest as opposed to 100 nests is obviously much higher. So it's just another flavour of what's out there that's preventing these birds from fledging enough young.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions that we've had on the chat room. If anybody has a burning question, they want to unmute themselves and wave and raise your question, please do now. Yeah.
Another one from Michael, if I may. I just wonder how the problem of predation is being addressed, if at all.
Yes, yeah, this is, as you can imagine, it potentially can be quite an emotive issue as to what people do about predation. It's one of the challenges we face, that there are two broad approaches. You can take lethal approaches, or you can take non-lethal approaches. And non-lethal would involve things like predator-proof fencing, which you might see in a lot of RSPB reserves, which are really good in terms of a site that you own and have management of the water levels, etc. The challenge we face is that these are active farmland sites, and they are also subject to fluctuations of the water levels in Loch Erne, which move up and down by several feet. So predator-proof fencing on a permanent basis isn't feasible for us, even if we could afford it. So we put up some exclusionary fences, which keep the mammalian predators back to a large extent, not entirely. It would be wrong to say they do. The other thing I should mention over here, which is a good news story, is that we have a very healthy population of pine marten in Fermanagh, which are very rare now in large parts of the UK and absent. But our pine marten have come back really well in the last 25 years probably. And as an aside, have had a very positive impact on our grey squirrel population that has almost collapsed in Fermanagh, and our reds have come back. But as you can imagine, pine marten are another factor. And obviously pine marten are protected species, so you can't have any obviously lethal control of pine marten. It has to be non-lethal control. In terms of the lethal control, we follow very much the same guidelines as RSPB follow, in the sense that where there is a demonstrable need for it, we will undertake it, particularly with crows and foxes and mink. Mink are less controversial because they're non-native, so they're an invasive species and people are quite keen to deal with them. We shoot foxes during the winter time, late winter, early spring, and into the summer. And it's very much important to say we're not trying to eradicate foxes. That's not the aim of this. It's to ensure that fox levels on the key sites aren't unsustainably high. And ideally, I wouldn't like to see any foxes on site between April and June, but in reality, that's not what happens with foxes. But it's very much a case of we're not trying to target a huge area. It's very specific in terms of where we try and control the foxes and the crows. This is not a matter of trying to deal with crows over a massive landscape. So we're trying to deal with them in specific places. And I think one of the limiting factors we do have in terms of our larger waders, our lapwing and our curlew, I am very confident now, sort of based on some of our camera trapping data, is predation is a big issue for us. And that would reflect RSPB's experience elsewhere and in Fermanagh, that predation is a factor even where the habitat is good. And a lot of that predation is mammalian predation, because we can deal with crows fairly effectively. A lot of it comes down to foxes, and believe it or not, badgers can be a problem in some areas, and the fencing is quite good to keep them out. So that's the mix of lethal and non-lethal as we sort of choose it by site basis.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Okay then, unless there's no further quick questions, we'll just start to bring this to a close. So we have a comment from Mary Marchant, a very wonderful project you're achieving for nature and wildlife. Thank you for showing us. We're very pleased to have a message from Richard Watson. Some of you might remember Richard gave us a fabulous talk last year about a trip to Finland. Richard is involved in this Loch Erne partnership, and he said, nice to see everybody in Bath RSPB again. Loch Erne Landscape Partnership is making a significant difference on and around Loch Erne where he lives. Many thanks to the RSPB, who make a hugely effective contribution to the work of the partnership as our lead partner. So lovely to see you again, Richard. Thank you for joining in.
See you, and nice to see all those faces from Bristol again.
Really good. Okay, well, I think it really is for me to thank you, Elle-Marie and Michael and Tony, for telling us about your work. It's clearly an enormous project working at scale on a broad and diverse range of different projects, bringing benefits to the natural world and the communities in the whole area. It's so interesting, and I think it would be a fabulous place to visit. I'm sure there's some opportunities for bird watching all around Loch Erne. So thank you very much for the effort you've put into talking to us tonight. So if we can just show our appreciation for a superb talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne, and every single member is really welcome to come to Fermanagh. Fermanagh is definitely known for our local hospitality here, so you will be made very welcome when you come and see this beautiful part of the world.
Thank you. I think it's an area we need to think about visiting. So just before we close then, a couple of final notices. Can I remind everybody that the outdoor visit that should have been to RSPB Nag's Head last Sunday was cancelled due to the waterlogged conditions, and it will now be held on Sunday the 29th of January at 10 AM. So please let Dave Newman know if you're going to be attending that one. The February outdoor visit will be to Blashford Lakes on Saturday the 18th of February at 10 o'clock. That's somewhere we've visited in the past, and there's always a good range of birds to be seen down there. So again, please let Dave know if you're going to be there. All details are on the programme card and on our group website. The next indoor meeting will again be a Zoom event on Wednesday the 15th of February, same time, 7:15 for a 7:30 start. And this will be a talk by the Cairngorm Connect RSPB team, telling us about the landscape scale restoration work being done up there in North East Scotland, which looks from the news to be extremely snowy at the moment. The details of that and the Zoom link will be sent out nearer the time. So unless anybody has anything else, a final thank you to Elle-Marie, Michael and Tony for a really interesting presentation. Best wishes to all of you for the next stages of your project. Thank you everybody viewing, joining in this evening. We'll now be closing down, and we hope to see you all again next time. We've got some thank you messages coming through on the chat line as well. So thank you and good night to everybody. Cheery bye.